Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Complex Like Wine, the podcast where we talk about complicated things and improve over time just like wine does. This episode's going to be really good, especially for all the guys out there and all the ladies, of course, but I think this is going to really speak to the men out there. So if you're a dude or, you identify as man, or you have a guy in your life that you're trying to understand this one, I definitely would recommend staying to it through the end. But this week we have Larry with us. And hi, Larry, how are you doing?
Doing quite well. Really appreciate you having me here. Looking forward to it, definitely.
Before we get into our topics for this week, we of course have our wine. So, what are you drinking today?
For myself, I'm having a nice red. It's actually from a winery that's relatively local to me. It's up in the Antelope Valley. This is their Runway Red. Really good sipping wine. Good, pairs really well if you like red meat. Big on bison and elk. Pairs really well with it. Also good to cook with as well.
Oh, nice, nice. I am having a blend. So, it's mixed with Sangiovese, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. It's called the Super Tuscan from a winery in Temecula called Altissima. So, this one I actually haven't even had a sip yet. So, anyway, but cheers.
Cheers to you. My glass is from Temecula. My wife and I
Oh,
went there on a wine tasting trip once, and
oh, nice. Yeah. How do you like Temecula?
it's actually pretty cool. I like the fact that it's really open and you have an opportunity to enjoy wine while looking at, greens and browns and things like that in nature and a ton of really interesting birds, oddly enough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm in the IE. I know you're local to Southern California as well. And so for me, it's about no traffic, like an hour away. And I'm a member at this specific winery that I'm drinking from. And so it gives me excuse to go hopefully every other month. Just, drink for free, have some wine, a charcuterie, and yeah, like you said, enjoy the scenery when it's not too hot.
Yeah, I would say that's a good luck recently. I mean, it's been scorching, especially, and I'm in the San Fernando Valley. It has been a hot one, to say the least.
Yeah, it's been gnarly. I was in Vegas last weekend and it just made me appreciate California weather so much more because in Vegas it was like 112, 113 out there and it was too much. So I'm like, you know what? I'll take my 102, 103.
Agreed. And we have a little bit of humidity, so it helps give a little bit of relief. I
Yeah.
mean, out there it's just dry. There's no wind. It's just hot,
You,
oppressive heat.
you feel like you're literally in a sauna, but yeah, no.
Not in the good way.
Not in a good way, not in an enjoyable way. Well, Larry, so I'm going to kind of let you take it away, introduce yourself, share with the podcast why you're here and what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. Well, as you had mentioned, my name is Larry. I live out in the San Fernando Valley. Last name is Jerro. One thing that really interested me about being here and speaking and being and taking part in this podcast was I am a recent father. My son is now 6 weeks old today. Uh,
Yay!
he's awesome. I love the little guy. My wife is actually upstairs with him right now while we're recording here in the basement. And I really just wanted to have an opportunity to kind of get it out there because I've noticed a lot of men that I've interacted with and also that I see interacting with other people online. There's a there's not enough room for vulnerability because it's so stigmatized as being one way. For myself, I'm as we had discussed earlier, I'm very analytical. I'm very methodical in my approach. So I'm not going to be the typical, male who's talking about this in a space like this, where it's not as much about the feeling, but it's a little bit about what can be done. Because I'm a problem solver, and I imagine a lot of other men out there, as well as women, have problem solver mindsets, and hopefully I can give them some tools that I've been able to borrow through therapy and pass that along and pay it forward, so to speak.
Yeah, no, again, thank you so much for reaching out and being here with me today. Like you said, there's specifically more with men, there's not a lot of space for men to be vulnerable, or there's not enough tool guides or ways for them to figure out how to be vulnerable. And so I'm very happy that you're here to speak and touch on it, especially from being a man, your perspective, and enlightening other men and the females like myself, just like how we can be there for each other and how we can support. So, but yeah, congrats to your baby.
Thank you. Thank you. I miss getting, more than 2 hours of sleep a day. But I mean, whatever, especially now that he's not having involuntary smiles, his smiles are real and they're authentic. I mean, it's totally worth it. Like, I recommend it to anybody who's, old enough and ready to do it. So,
Yeah, it's once you get past the age where like they're just not sleeping throughout the night and you're just gonna have all the different life seasons. Oh man, I'm excited for you.
likewise, likewise. And it's been a really big learning moment for myself because I'm not going to say that it's been super easy and it doesn't come without its frustration. But being able to kind of push through the frustration, it I'm a person who really loves a challenge and I like operating under pressure. So this places like everything that I like to do and have to do in my life. It condenses it down and it makes me have to spend more time while I'm doing it, focusing on getting it done sooner. So whether it's work, if it's an exercise, if it's sauna time, if it's time in the cold plunge, if it's meditation, it allows me to have kind of a goal in sight versus having the extra, 8 to 7 hours within a day and kind of just spending some time. Let me see what's on YouTube. Let me see what's on Yahoo. Like, no, I can actually just go get the job done and then kind of get back to the things that matter in life. And that's my wife, that's my family.
I love that. So when we had first met, we're kind of talking about, how you want to raise your son a little differently than the way you were raised in terms of what it means to be a man, vulnerability, and all that. So to give us some context, can you share with like your upbringing, like what were you taught was to be a man, what vulnerability was, and just kind of from all of that?
Okay, well, for me growing up, I grew up in the city of Lakeview Terrace, which sounds a lot nicer than it is. It's right next to Pacoima, which I'm pretty sure is going to sound a lot more familiar to people. Rodney King caught a beat down about like, I don't know, a few blocks away from where I grew up. So it was an area that had its, struggles. And because it had its struggles, it meant that a lot of the boys, like myself, we were raised to be hard men. And there was not really much room for anything outside of that. Academic achievement was never necessarily celebrated. Speaking the way that I do was never necessarily celebrated. Well, I don't have the fair skin anymore because I spend more time outside in the garden. But before I had really fair skin, and that wasn't necessarily the safest environment to be in, unless you were somebody who was willing to stand up to the test, so to speak, that were being placed in front of you. And luckily, I kind of hit the genetic jackpot. I'm 6'2". I have wider shoulders. I'm a bigger male. So that came with a lot of not having to engage as much physical contact with others. But at the same time, it did, it had its privileges. And I think being a larger person in that environment, netted me the ability to kind of be a little bit more of a free thinker. Although like crying was something I didn't do until, very recently. I mean, even alone, I wouldn't tell like none of that. It was just something that didn't happen. And now with the way I would like to raise my child is I want him to have a toolbox that's full of every emotion, not just anger, not just rage, not just, spite. I want him to have the ability to converse with somebody and not have to resort to physical violence to get their point across. And I want him to understand that regardless of what occurs and what happens in life, he can always come to me. If he's right, if he's wrong, I will always be there for him and always have his back.
In your perspective, what do you think it means to be a man? Because you have your like your societal thing, there's like the whole like I think it's more trendy to throw out the word toxic masculinity, um, and just kind of what the expectations are of that. But from your perspective, what do you say like it means to be a man?
For me, I think one of the most important things when it comes to being a man, especially with my definition now, is it's being confident enough to actually be yourself. So if who you are is somebody who is considered to be a little bit more feminine or a little bit more gentle or a little bit kinder or a little bit meeker versus weaker, to accept that about yourself and be okay with it. There's no standard that you need to uphold or stand to because in doing so, like the red pill ideology, being a person that follows that tooth and nail, and then when you follow it so stringently, you're afraid to step outside of that line in fear of getting ostracized. I mean, to me, I would say that fear and a result of not wanting to be yourself is not being a man. To me, I think having confidence in yourself to be wrong is a very big thing. And then accepting your faults and then learning from them and trying to grow past them. I think those are all things that make a good person, as let alone a good man.
I love that. Would you say you maybe came to that conclusion like during therapy, or do you think going towards starting therapy, you already were like noticing while you were growing up that kind of definition or that idea?
I would say it was a combination of the two. Going through therapy provided me the ability to actually recognize that that was what I was trying to do in my life the entire time. I've always been a contrarian. The only difference is at that time I hit it. I mean, I remember being a young kid and like everyone in my neighborhood listened to either hip hop or R&B. And if you listen to anything outside of that, you were weird and something was wrong with you. So what I would do, and this is sad, this is very sad because people didn't come over and go, combing through my computer like forensics or anything. But I mean, I literally had a folder that I hid within multiple other folders that was just labeled white, and it had like Blink 182 and NSYNC, Backstreet Boys in it. And I was like, okay, all right, I like this stuff, but I'm not exactly gonna broadcast it to everyone. Like I'll bob my head to it, like I'm listening to a Tupac song on the school bus, but I'm actually listening to like Bye 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 or something. So yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it took some time to kind of just even accept that because I've always been kind of typecast into a role. There's a certain way I'm supposed to portray and a certain way that I'm supposed to be and act. And at the times, I would just create characters. These were characters I would present outwardly to the world because it took a lot for me to respect another individual to the point to where it's like if you're going to classify me and place me in these boxes, I'm going to ahead and give you exactly what you want. If you think I'm going to be the Carlton, so to speak, I'll be the Carlton of it. If you think I'm going to be more the Fresh Prince of it, I'll be more the Fresh Prince of it. But I did not feel that people at the time had the right to actually know who I was, and in so I lost a lot of myself in that. And circling back through therapy and realizing what I actually wanted to do was to find self acceptance so that I'd have the armor and I'd have the wherewithal to go out into the world, and quote unquote do combat with the world and suffer the slings and arrows. And I think accepting that was one of the larger things. And I think that was through therapy, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. And that's great you're able to recognize that because there's so many people that never get to that place where they're honest with who they are or, who they want to be. And they get stuck in that space where they're having that facade to fit in or, to get approval from other people or just because they're just haven't been in a place to really be self-aware, recognize who they are, that they just never get to that space. So that's great that you're able to find that through therapy too.
Yes, and I think that is one of the major things that I think therapy does, or even just talking things out with people other than yourself, or if you're going to talk them out with yourself, writing them down, rereading what you wrote, and then even, kind of saying it out loud, because saying it out loud makes it real. And the fact that you took the time to write it down, you could see where it's like, well, man, I'm really ridiculous for believing this right here. Or maybe this is a really good thought that I need to explore further, and then just kind of handling it through those three experiences, those three ways of feeling it, so to speak. I think it's able to help put things in perspective if one can't afford to enroll into therapy or does not have the time to roll into therapy. I think a lot of different things can be used as tools for therapy, whether it's exercise, whether it's through personal challenges, things that allow you to have a little bit of self gratitude and self appreciation.
Mm-hmm. So I want to kind of ask now the comparison. So before, when you were younger, you mentioned earlier that like you didn't even cry with yourself. Like it was just very much like being vulnerable with emotions was not a thing. So during that time when you were having these emotions, how would you process it versus now? What have been some of the surprises or big differences you've noticed?
Well, previously, the way that they would get processed is they wouldn't. They'd kind of just sit on a conveyor belt and continue to build up until that conveyor belt got full, and then things kind of blew up. Like the top would just kind of blow off. So it could be something that's really small, and then I would take that really small thing and make it a lot bigger than it was. Or I'd take that frustration, that anxiety, and I'd place it onto other people. If we're out, with my wife and someone stares at me. Like this was a thing that I would not accept when I was younger. And now I look back at it like, wow, that was really insane. But if someone were to stare at me with like a scowl on their face, I would make it my intention to, I guess, punk. I don't know if the youngsters are still saying that nowadays. you know,
We'll go with punk. Yeah, that still works.
yeah. All right. So I would punk a person. I would kind of steal their masculinity or steal their, thunder, so to speak, so that I could feel better about myself and kind of get that off of myself and onto other things. At that time, I was also exercising. So exercising was a big release for me that I didn't even realize. And then also just being out in nature. Nature, gardening, that's something I've always really been into. And that allowed me, without even realizing it, to kind of decompress a lot. And now, while doing it actively and paying attention to it while I'm out and doing these things, it definitely helps things settle in. One thing I actually wanted to mention in regards to when I was younger and not allowing myself to cry, my grandmother, who pretty much raised me, was like my rock. She was there all the time. She passed away when I was early into the relationship with my now wife. And I got in the car, I sat with her in the car, and I kind of just sat there staring out through the windshield in the driver's seat. And I bawled for, I remember it was 10 seconds. I was like, I'll allow myself 10 seconds and then cut it right off. It was like turning off a faucet. And then I was like, let's go out. So we ended up going to like her brother-in-law or her brother's home for like a little get together and just acted like it never happened. And now looking back on that, like I feel a bit of remorse for myself because I didn't allow myself at that time to properly grieve someone who meant more to me than anything else in this world. And now I've reached a place in my life to where I can go back and I can grieve about that moment. I can journal about that moment. I can kind of have sympathy for myself and allow myself to kind of breathe. So
Hmm.
I would say that that's been one of the biggest leaps I've ever had in my life, and it's majorly appreciated.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. My dad and brother would definitely say I'm an emotional person, but not so much of like a crier type of emotional way, but especially when I was younger and I was going through a lot of issues, I definitely held everything in. I never wanted to ask for help. I never wanted to share how I felt. I just bottled it all in. And like you said, like the conveyor belt until it would pop. And now that I've gotten older and I've just been a lot more gracious with myself to have my moments to cry, or if I just need a vent, like I'm just allowing myself to give the space where I need to feel whatever emotions I'm feeling. What a difference it makes after. Like it's just like, oh, okay, like I have a weight off my shoulders, I can breathe, just a release. And this kind of goes into one of the things we want to talk about, like the body keeps score, and just like your body will let you know it's done and it needs to release somehow.
I agree. I mean, I was maybe in my early 30s, like 32, when I had my first panic attack, or at
Mm,
least the thing I actually knew was a panic attack. And I just remember I was shaking and I was freezing, although it was like a warm evening. And I just went and got in bed. And my wife's like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just feel like I'm really cold and I can't shake it. I think I'm getting sick or something." And she's like, "No, you're having a panic attack right now."
wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, "What do you mean? What's a panic attack?" And then so the first thing I did is I jumped on Google. I'm like, "WebMD, this is what a panic attack is. How do you fix a panic attack?" So yeah,
How was that for you? Because another thing I was gonna ask, when I finally was able to start letting my emotions come out, it was so uncomfortable for me. I hated it. Like I did not want to cry. Like, and it took me a long time to get a place where I could cry. Like I would probably have a few tears and then my body would just be like done. We're not crying anymore. And so getting to the place now where I can let my emotions out, which is also related to I'm not having panic attacks anymore. To get to that transition, it was really uncomfortable for me. So, like, how was it for you?
I have to just agree wholeheartedly. It was one of the most uncomfortable experiences ever. And for myself, I had to work up to crying. I mean, it started with we have a sauna in our garage. So what I did was it's in the garage. The garage is super insulated, and it allowed me the ability to kind of just scream. Because before I can get to crying, I had to approach it from a quote unquote aggressive manner. And through that manner and channeling that and realizing how draining that was,
Mhm.
it was one day, I was just screaming as hard as I could, and I was thinking about my grandmother, and I thought about my grandfather, and just the choices I had made in my life. And then I just started crying, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And I'm big on control, especially self-control, and there was nothing I can do to stop it, and I just accepted it. And then after it stopped, it took me 5-10 minutes, and after I was over, just the, as you mentioned, that weight off your shoulders, that release that you feel. I mean, I could not describe how amazing that felt. It was one of the better moments of my life, considering what it originated from. It was a really big moment for me, kind of like that dash on the lifeline. That was a major dash for me, and that was something I wholeheartedly appreciate.
Yeah, when you get like, so to say, like over the hump, the hill, to you finally got that release and you can kind of just now get grounded again and take a deep breath. For me, it's just I feel like 10 pounds lighter. I feel a little bit more clear headed. Yeah, might be drained afterwards because all of that like stress was just needing to bottle up. But I feel like, quote unquote, the recovery time of whatever I was going through just gets expedited so much faster.
Oh, I agree. And even just the following day, the night after sleep, it was just such a reinvigoration, because I noticed that when I was carrying, all this stress and anxiety, the next day I'd wake up, even if I got 8 hours, I feel like I only got 2 hours of sleep, or I spent, you know, hours in bed writing in a journal at the time, or writing down stories, because I couldn't get my mind to quiet down or to settle down and allow myself the ability to relax. And I noticed that as I progressively got better at handling my emotions versus bottling my emotions and dealing with my emotions, it got to a point to where, 2, 3 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep was feeling better than the eight I had before. And I mean, and that was even after being a person who's always been fairly health conscious. I mean, I've always been into supplements. I've always been into, I'm not a spiritual person, but I look into it from I guess, a theoretical means. If my mind believes it, if burning sage or whatever works for other people, and I believe it works for me, then cleanse away, old sage. And that was just kind of how I was.
Yeah. Let's get into the Body Keep score. So for people listening, it's a book, a really good book. I'm currently about like halfway through it. You already finished it, right?
Yes, I've actually read it a couple of times.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, simply for the fact that there are a lot of tools in there that I missed the first time around. Because the first time around I read the book, it was just more like, oh my God, that's me. That's so me. And it was primarily focusing on, soldiers who had went and served in wars. And I'm like, I've never served in a war. But then I realized, like, whoa, there's a lot of trauma that occurred to me growing up where I grew up. I mean, as we had even mentioned before we started this podcast, there was a time where I was in the living room with my wife. We were watching movies, and it was like on the 4th of July, or it was around the 4th of July. And someone had, shot off a couple of fireworks. And for whatever reason, because they were our neighbor right behind us and our window was right there, like, it took me back to being in the middle of a drive-by when I was younger. And I mean, I freaked. I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment. So I'm like telling my wife, you go upstairs, lock yourself in the room. And then, she's, rightfully so, like, you're tripping, they're fireworks. And, we had the conversation afterwards and just kind of wrapping my mind around, like, whoa, I am not as in control as I think I am.
Yeah, you're dealing with some PTSD. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of things, like, I'm extremely hyper vigilant, even to this day. I have friends that are in law enforcement, and they're really big on sitting, where their back's not against a door or an open window or things of that nature. I remember when they told me about it after they had enrolled in the academy, and I'm like, well, I've been doing that since forever because you don't want to get caught slipping, you know? I take pride in the fact that I've never been jumped. And that's because I'm just paying attention to what's going on around me. So, yeah,
The perks of being vigilant, the perks of having some trauma, right?
exactly, exactly. But one thing that it did do was I think it did instill at least a I don't want to say bravery because it teeters on the point of being foolish, but it did put me in a point to where I have always stood up for the smaller person or the person lower, quote unquote, on the totem pole. If I've ever seen like a homeless person, because it's a really bad problem now here in the
Yeah.
San Fernando Valley. If someone's a little out of their mind and they're throwing trash at some kids, and this is like a specific moment that happened while my wife and I were eating, and like these kids were younger, they were Asian, and this was during the entire height of the bug and everything going on. And there's this grown man throwing trash at these kids. I mean, like 12 and 9, a little sister and her brother. And I'm just in my head, like I saw people watching it and filming it on their phone. And that just infuriated me. I'm like, how are you not going to be active and do something? It's like, oh, you're going to cancel this person when these children are in danger right now? Tell them to stop. Just tell them you see it, you know, shoo them off, be involved.
Yeah, I think we're just so caught up on like what's the word? Like being in surveillance. We're just on like let me just watch and initially we're just wanting to record it, but then we're losing sight of the thing of like you said, like standing up and getting taking action and helping. And I think that's also part that kind of ties into the whole vulnerability thing of you're putting yourself out there for the sake of somebody else. And I think a lot of people don't have the toolkits or the awareness to do that, unfortunately.
I agree. And I think that kind of ties in hand with, at least from the male perspective or the traditionally masculine male perspective, when I see, videos of a guy who punched a young woman at a bar because she denied his advances. And I mean, to me, I'm like, we're in a world where all the other guys that saw that occur allowed that to occur. And that to me, it's like it's the observational, it's the not wanting to get involved, but it's also that little bit of everybody's like, well, I've been turned down before, and a lady did it to me, and it was not in a very polite or nice manner, so maybe she deserved it.
Mm.
And me hearing that someone deserved any kind of physical action because of words, it's never made any sense to me. And I think that a lot of the trauma that kind of exists within the male community by it going unresolved, it blows up in those ways, and then there's no corrective measure to it. I'm not saying you need to beat the person to a pulp, but not letting that person know that what they did was wrong kind of only emboldens it to happen again over and over and over. And I think as men, and this is probably where it comes off a little bit controversial. I think that as men, that in this world and in this society, we accept a higher standard. And it's a higher standard because of the fact of the amount of physical violence that we can enact on someone else. And with that power, to quote Spider-Man, comes great responsibility.
Mm.
You have to be able to A, control yourself, and B, you have to help steer your fellow man into not being an aggressive, abusive person. And I think that a lot of that comes from just this adversarial stance that we have, a lot of times with the red pill and, the black pill or the blue pill and all these subsectors and groups. But I think most people just kind of fit in the middle. They want to be heard and they just have unresolved issues within themselves that they're kind of just spitting out on everyone else like I used to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. So, kind of picking off of that with the Body Keep score, what were some things that you learned that you would want to share with other men or even females, women that were for you, you realized like, oh, that's me, that's what I needed to learn. Like, one of the big things with me, because the book touches a lot on like PTSD, was just your body will harbor it. And one of the biggest kind of like aha moments was your body absorbs it like muscle memory. and that it can be a hard thing to break. It's not impossible. It takes practice and work and therapy and, healing, but there's just a little bit of like a muscle memory that gets tied into it. So that was like one of my biggest aha moments. But for you, like, what are some things more specifically as a man that you'd want to share with other men that you learned through the book that maybe we could start applying into practice or that people can just start being aware of?
For me, it was a lot of what you just mentioned, and I'll piggyback on that a bit. I think that we have a mentality that if we cannot think about that thing, whatever that thing is, if we can, just kind of ignore that thing, that it's, out of sight, out of mind. But the reality is our body, even without our minds getting involved in the process, is going to react in a certain manner. If a person was picked on when they were younger by someone that wore a lot of blue t-shirts, so now when you see a blue t-shirt, your body is going to tense up a little bit. It's going to prepare for that flight or fight kind of measure. And without even knowing it, you're placing yourself in a heightened sense of, anxiety, and you're going to react in a way that's maybe not in accordance to how you would normally react in any other situation. And without actually dealing with the source of that issue and the source of that problem and leaving it unresolved, it's going to continue to just build or just put you in a point to where you just become self-destructive. And I think the one thing that the book does focus on tremendously is giving you tools to actually help empower yourself versus saying, hey, this is a problem. Not really much else you can do with it except, just deal. Good luck. It actually gives you a couple of tools. And again, myself being fairly analytical, if I can get part A and part B, I can figure out what part C is. And I think that that's what the book does is it gives you some tools that are more than just a hammer. Because when you're a guy and you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And it's just, it's it's not a very easy, it's not a very free way of living your life. It's extremely restrictive. And I think that, if as a man or as a woman, you want to give yourself the opportunity to kind of see who you are in its full, glory, as well as in all of its, faults and scars. I think finding the source of that issue and working on the source with a very empathetic manner to yourself, I think that that can help just about anybody, and it helped me. So I figure there's got to be someone else out there that it'll work for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm that special or unique.
What were one of the tools that maybe was your favorite to learn or is like your favorite to talk about?
For me, it's the actual acknowledgement of it. It's saying, well, I did go through this and whatever that this is. For me, it was growing up and, having to fight or not wanting to fight, but actually having to fight. There was a famous TikTok trend my wife showed me because I'm not on TikTok, but my wife showed me this trend of the parents would go get their children and say, hey, I got to go fight this lady down the street. She has a son. So you got to come with me to fight too. And then when my wife showed it to me, and I'm like, well, why are these kids afraid? Of course, that's what you go do. That's just the way it. And then when my wife looked at me, she's like, no, that's not what people do.
It's a little different now.
I'm like, wait, that's not what people do? I thought that's what you do. Yeah. So yeah, like and actually being able to put words to that and acknowledge it and say, hey, with despite the best intentions, this was the message that was relayed to me as a child. And it happened. I can't ever go back in time to change it, but I can spend some time with that little version of myself and have some empathy for them and say, you know what? It's okay. It's really okay. And I think the biggest tool that it gives, a person like myself is just the acknowledgement and the acceptance that it's okay and that it's not instantaneous. I can't sit here and say that I am now the great Buddha. I'm still a person that's going to randomly, blow off the handle. Like I play sports. I still play baseball on Sundays. So like a bad call or a person talking a certain way is still going to get under my skin to where I react. But I mean, it's like night and day to where it would have been before versus what it is now. And I think that's one of the best tools I got from the book. And I think anybody can pull that from the book. But there's a lot of other stuff in there, especially when it comes to self actualization, giving you tools about reading and writing about your traumas, journaling, which I know a lot of people will think like, man, this is crazy. But trust me, Doug Funny had it right. When you journal, it really, really helps you put things into perspective.
Yeah, I never really journaled when I was younger. Starting the pandemic, I've been much more intentional of journaling. I probably should do it more now, but it has just really helped me process what I'm feeling just to put into words. And I think some people might feel the same way, but when I first started journaling, there was a little bit of like an intimidation factor to it because I thought I had to like write my words perfectly, not be able to like scribble a word or, like have a pencil so I can erase something. I had to have my thoughts all cohesive on the paper first. But I've just kind of got to the point now when I journal, I just word vomit. Whatever I'm feeling, let me just write it on there. If I want to scribble, I can scribble. If I want to write caps, like, fuck, like, I can do that. It's fine. And it's just helped me just to get whatever my thoughts are on paper. And then that way I have a place later just to read through it if I need to. Another thing that I started doing this year was doing like video journals. So I would record myself talking, and there's just something about being able to voice. You're feeling the power of voice, especially if there might be things that you're not ready to share with somebody else, or maybe if you're not seeing a therapist. But just being able to talk, and then you can rewatch the video after as an observer, and you get to really just be in tune with like the emotions you're feeling, where you were at that time. And then even if you save it later, you can rewatch it months after and just see the growth that you've done. For me, that's been a huge one.
That actually sounds really interesting. I've never video journaled. I've voice journaled before because there was just a point where like I'd be in the middle of like riding on the bike or trying to run. I hate running, but trying to run or anything like that, or sitting in the sauna to where I'd be sweating too much to actually put pen to paper. It did give me an opportunity to just kind of spout my thoughts out. And after spouting them out, I'd write them down. When I was younger, journaling was, I kind of had that same fear. I mean, to the point to where it felt like I was turning in homework. And
Yes.
I'm like, I got to make sure I have the perfect grammar. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, I'm reading this. It doesn't make sense. I don't care. I'm reading it.
My big one for me was like, am I spelling this word right? Like, do I need to Google it? And I'm like, wait, I don't care. Like, it's just me. It's fine. I'll know what I'm saying.
It's like, I'll figure it out, you know? Yeah, I 100%. Yeah, I was the exact same way. And I think that that constant fear of judgment, like we all have that, we all have that super ego there that's constantly policing us, and one thing for me that actually worked, and I got this from the book, I extrapolated on my own, was I started thinking about, the voices in your head, the voices that are like, you can do it or you can't do it. And I thought about the actual voice that it was, like, what did it sound like? I noticed that a lot of my detracting thoughts and a lot of my anxious thoughts were the voices of moments in my life that I felt less than or felt like I couldn't do it. So it's like I'd hear an uncle saying, that's not being a man. Get up. Don't be soft. Don't be, a more graphic term for soft, and things along those lines. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, that's not even my voice. My voice is the one that's saying, you know what, you can do it. Get up, keep going, keep pushing. It's okay if you fail. Don't be afraid to fail. And I just started listening to myself more. Like, as odd as that sounds, I
Mhm.
started giving that voice more volume and turning down the other negative versions of, the exact same scenario. That made me take more risks that were a lot more calculated. But at the same time, it allowed me to take more risk and allowed me to be vulnerable. It allowed me to enroll into therapy. And within the black and brown community, therapy is not something it's not shunned anymore, but it's also not accepted with open arms. I remember telling like family members, like, yeah, I'm in therapy, or even friends, and like, I'm in therapy. And then a lot of the guys like, why are you in therapy? Like, what's wrong with
Mhm.
you? And to
Mhm.
me, I'm just like, because I need it. Like, it's like, why would I go to the gym? Like, I feel like I'm out of shape and I need to put some, muscle on. I go to the gym. So I go to a therapist if I feel like I need to take some of the load off, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really glad you brought that all up as you were talking about the voices in your head. I was just thinking back to the negative dialogue I would tell myself when I was younger. And I've never intentionally thought about this way until you just brought it up right now. But now I'm recognizing Oh yeah, all that negative dialogue, it wasn't my voice. It was a different voice. And it was their words that were telling me, or the things that they would actually tell me, I would just have it on replay and then tell it to myself. And that's I'm really glad you brought that, because it's a huge thing to be get self-aware and make that distinction of like, you're not talking to yourself that way. It's just been that, again, kind of like that muscle memory that's just been embedded subconsciously, that now you need to learn, okay, let me take this. It's not me. This is me. How would I talk to myself? And yeah, no, thank you for that, because that's a huge point.
Yeah, it was something that I saw for myself, and oddly enough, one thing attributing to that was like I'm a super closet nerd. Like, I mean, I literally only watch horror movies.
Oh, wait, okay, hold on. What's your favorite horror movie before we continue?
Okay, like old school, new school, like what are we?
All time, because I'm a horror person, so.
Okay, so for me, it's this movie called Night House. It's about this. It's kind of like a grief parable in a way, and dealing with loss. And the way that they never really show you a monster, like the monster is nothing, like literally the monster is nothing, kind of like the never ending story. And that amount of impending doom and grief and the atmosphere of that movie is just so amazing. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It was a movie we just happened to pick up. We were just like, let's just check this out. Like the reviews seem cool. And I don't want to give anything away, so I'm trying to not like delve into it too deep. But I will just say it was a mind F in a really good way. In a really good way.
I'm gonna save that and watch it later, because I have not seen it.
Yeah. What about yourself? Favorite horror movie?
Um, so so fun fact, I got my bachelor's in film, so my nickname was Horror Girl because all my films were thrillers or horrors. And what really got me into horror films, sorry guys, we're doing a little like horror like little
Sidebar.
sidebar, yeah, yeah. One of my I got really into like the classic monsters, like the 1930s through 50s, all black and white, super cheesy. Like I think my favorite one's probably Creature of Black Lagoon. And I haven't seen it since I was younger, but I just remember it stuck with me. Or The Haunting of Hill House. I really love that one as well.
Love that movie.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely love it.
one of my favorites, but that is what got me into like thrillers and horrors. And so now every year my brother and I, we go to Halloween Horror Nights, because like that is our thing. But anyway, you said horror, I'm like, wait, I have to ask.
And it's totally worth it. I will have to say. Like horror definitely is worth it. You
Yeah.
know, and like for myself, it was horror, it was anime, all those things that kind of made me like that closet nerd. Because to everyone else, because I'd watch movies, but we talk about like Blade, you know, when I was a kid, or we talk about like I'm gonna get you, sucker, giving you guys an idea of how old I am. And that was the stuff I talk about. Like, and I'd find enjoyment in it, but I really felt that thrill and watching a movie that was a little bit deeper than what the premise was. So, like the cheesy films that you're mentioning, I used to love those movies because it wasn't about what was on the surface. And The Creature from the Black Lagoon is a perfect example of it. It's not really just about the fact that there's this fish man that's coming up from the water. It's the focus on like the idea of where the American societal views were sitting at that time, the relationship between men and women, especially between men and women of different ethnic backgrounds and things of that
Right.
nature. And like the way that they were able to openly discuss it behind closed doors, so to speak, it reminded me a lot of God, the book about the portrait for Dorian Gray. It reminded me a lot of that. And I really enjoyed it. So like that was the big thing with me with cheesy movies. Like big time on like especially B movies like Trauma, all that stuff. I'm
Yeah.
super into it.
It's just fun. And then like you said, like if you get really into it, like you get all the different layers. Okay, enough of the sidebar, but before I get carried away. Um, all right, and I kind of want to now get into, you've read the Body Q score, you've gone tools, now you're in a better place with, what it means to be a healthy man, or just a man in general, like just healthy in general with yourself. And now you have a son. Like, what are some things as a man you'd share with like a female like me, or just any other listener, of like men's mental health, and like the way like a man might approach things, or the way men's process stuff, like that you've maybe noticed with the guys in your life, that maybe as a female or younger man we're not completely aware of?
I would say patience. And also understanding. I think one thing that our society has done is it's shifted over to where we have patience and understanding, for the female experience. Because just to be completely frank and honest, the female experience is terrifying. You know, I think Dave Chappelle kind of said it best. I'd walk or I'd take a train with $10,000 on my backpack, but I wouldn't take anything else, like something that a woman would have in that same train. And that's something that a woman walks around with every single day of her life. So to me, I think patience and understanding going both ways. And then also, I don't want to say to not be aware, because if you're not aware of the way a man is acting or something that a man is doing that's threatening, I don't want to say that. But at the same time, it's not every man is that way. I would say even the vast majority of men are not that way.
Hmm.
And I think that a little bit more patience and understanding, it goes a long way. But I would say to the young men out there is also practice that same patience and understanding. Don't be afraid to go approach a young woman if that's what you find, yourself attracted to. Uh, and then just talk to her like a person. You don't need to listen to any pickup gurus or flash any kind of extra money or be 6 foot plus or be muscular and all these things. I say practice physical health, because what you put into your body is usually what you're going to put out into the world. I would say exercise, because it's a good release for a lot of that, testosterone and adrenaline. But I would also just say approach people the way you would like to be approached. If you're going up to somebody who's smaller than you, maybe don't talk to them so aggressive. How would you appreciate it if a larger male or a larger human being approached you with that same amount of aggression? It's like, I probably wouldn't want that. So
Hmm.
put yourself in their shoes, and then also just be a little bit more appreciative. Even if you get turned down in a really, harsh manner, just kind of let it roll off your back and then just move on to the next one. And don't be afraid to fail. I think that fear of failure, it stunts so many people, and it makes them so anxious to where they lash out, because like it's confirmation bias. It's, I knew this was going to happen. This is why I don't do this. Rah. And the reality of the situation is it's just a drop in the bucket of life. I mean, we're a lot of people talk about how we're here for a very short time. I see that as the complete opposite. Like when I think about when I was 5, or I think about when I was 10, or even when I was 20, that seems like lifetimes ago. And I appreciate the amount of time that I have been on this planet, and then any time that I have left on it. And I think having a little bit more appreciation of that circle of life, to quote the great Mufasa, I think that it allows you the opportunity to kind of see the humanity in others and to not be so judgmental. And I think that that's something that can help people. And I think in terms of a tool that will help you practice that is to just smile a little bit more, be a little bit kinder, be kinder to yourself and be kinder to those around you. And the reality of the situation is unless you're placed in a situation to where you fear for your life, or you fear for your physical safety, there's not really a need to get boisterous or to get angry and to get rah rah about things, because a decision in anger can lead to changing the complete outlook and course of the rest of your life.
I love that. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
That was great. Are there any things, any other topics, or any things that you've learned that you'd want to share?
Yeah. I mean, literally on this stuff, I can talk about it all day.
Please, please.
One thing that I'm personally big on is physical fitness and overall health, because my brother-in-law, like this guy is like a guru. I didn't get his permission to use his name, but he's really big into the wellness and mental health scene. And the way that he like breaks down topics and puts stuff together, I'm just like blown away by it. So I think it's really good for people to reach out for things like that. Like if you're a person that's into like anime and you're really like Hunter x Hunter, find subgroups within the group of people that like Hunter x Hunter that talk about things that, like you like a character and this is why you like the character, and relate that character to yourself. And then look at ways that, you can help improve yourself the way that that character has. Because nobody ever really wants to be the villain unless you're a villain who has tried multiple things and just happens to have views that are different from the rest of the world versus the villain who's just like, oh, my life is bad and I'm sad, meh. No, like get out there, talk to other people, explore your own horizons, and try to put real food in your body. If you're eating out multiple times a week and you're going to like a fast food restaurant and you're putting French fries, you're putting that type of meat into your body, think about where that came from and think about how you are taking in all of those nutrients, for lack there of a better term. And think about how spending some time outside, if you live in an apartment, you don't have room to have a garden, maybe grow a couple of plants, have some strawberry plants, have a basil, have a peppermint plant, have a cayenne pepper plant. Just things that you can do. It allows you to take care of another life. It allows you to go through the arduous task of making sure it's watered, pruned, and it puts you in a perspective that allows you to gain respect for other things versus spending so much time in front of a screen, whether it be a video game or a violent movie, and you're just seeing this violence without consequence. And it's just like, oh, I guess that's how life is. Or, oh, if I, hit DoorDash, I can get food at my door. That's where food comes from, versus actually putting in that time. And if you're a meat eater, I recommend at least once in your life, go out on a hunt, see what that's like, see what it's like to take from that animal and to take that animal's life and understand that these factory farms that are processing living beings at this high rate, and then we're throwing a lot of that away. It is a waste of life. And I think that going out for a hunt, getting out in nature allows you the opportunity to just see where your stuff comes from. And then find crafts that you enjoy. Like myself, oddly enough, I love to make soap. Like soap is my crack. I love
Right.
it.
I remember when we first talked, it was the soap and the gardening. Like those were the two things.
Yeah, and I'm big on it. Like I kid you not. If you came into my home and like you came down to the basement where we keep like all the different fertilizers, and they're not fertilizers you just go buy at like Home Depot. I mean, all the bone meal that we have is, I got half an elk. And then as I'm going through the elk meat, anything that I have bones for, I'll dry the bones out, grind them up, and now that's bone meal. And then I have a vermiculture garden, which is a worm bin. I give my worms, they get their bone meal, they get the scraps of veggies and fruits that we eat or we juice. I make sure they get all that stuff. And kind of seeing that circle take place, it really just gives you perspective and it allows you to kind of even value yourself a little bit more. And if you're out there, you're working out, you're building your temple, you're just a little bit more confident in yourself. I know that there's a really big push for body positivity, and I'm really big on that myself. But there's a moment where you have to look at what's healthy. And I'm pretty sure that if you're positive about your body at a size that you're not comfortable with internally, you lift a couple weights, you walk a little bit, do a couple laps, and then you see that starts melting off and you could see the person that you're meant to be. I think you'll be positive about that body as well. And it's really okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really okay. And we all start somewhere. So I don't think it's going to be instantaneous. Just be comfortable and find a little bit of self love and self appreciation. It's such a big thing that a lot of people just forget to do because we're so busy. Our life is just so chock full of nothing. And then you look back at your day and you're like, what did I even do today? Like, what happened? I went to work. I don't know what else people do. Like, I went to work. I did those things. And then there's nothing you got out of the day. And you're just kind of punching a time clock internally until you take your final nap. And that's just, it's not a life I'd like to live. And I don't think many people do like to live it.
You get stuck in this routine. And I was actually, just before we started recording, I was editing an episode I did with this lady, Tequila. It's going to be released out at the time of this recording, it would have been released like a few months ago. But she's from Israel, and there's an Israeli saying where, for not word for word because I'm going to butcher it, but basically, like, you're too busy that you don't get any work done. And you get stuck in that grind and you just get on autopilot. And I've definitely noticed that with myself. And I think it was also related to like a coping mechanism where I would just make myself so busy. So any of like the thoughts, I didn't have time to think about it, but then I wouldn't acknowledge it and it would surface up as like an anxiety attack. and just going on like a zombie mode where I'm just, let me crank out my to do list for the day, go to bed, right? Next day, boom, 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 boom. Like, just thinking, we're already at the time of this recording, we're in August now. I'm like, where did this year go? Yesterday, no, today, the kids are already back in school. I'm driving to work. There's kids going back to school. I'm like, I literally thought they just got out of school like a few weeks ago. Like, their summer's done? Like, I don't understand.
And I've noticed the older that we get, the more the summer vacation loses its meaning. And I mean, I remember when I was like, wait, kids aren't in school right now? I was like, why are all these kids at this grocery store? I remember thinking that. My wife's like, oh, they're on summer break. What? Oh yeah, we're in July. I forgot about
I forget that's a thing. Like, that's a thing that there's actually like summer vacation. Not anymore when you're an adult.
No, not at all. And that's one thing I'd say that people should go find for themselves. And a lot of times people attribute like money being the thing that hinders them or stops them from being able to get where they want to go. But I mean, go to the beach and literally just sit down on the sand and watch the waves, or find a spot in your car or in your garage or in your closet or wherever you're at. Just find a moment to kind of close your eyes and just appreciate the moment for what it is. If there's wind blowing, figure out how it feels as it hits your skin. If you're drinking water, if it's warm water, if it's cold water, think about what it feels like as it touches your lips and like kind of slides down your throat. Like, really take the time to experience that moment and then kind of build on that from there and see how much of the day that you can actually take and find meaning in. And I think that that goes a long way for a lot of people. And challenge yourself, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself, because it's okay to fail, but it's also really good to win. It's really good to win.
And I think that's a big thing too. People are so scared of failure that they don't try. And how I've been trying now to view it is, you won't know until you try. Like, you not trying is the failure, but you giving it your best is the accomplishment. It's like the whole thing of the journey is what matters, not the destination. Because, yeah, you make it to your destination, but if you didn't get to remember how you got there or you didn't learn anything out of it, then what was the point? And especially if someone like me, I can be such a perfectionist. I want to get things done right on the first time, and I postpone things. I've just had to learn, like, this one didn't work out. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. I still gave it my best effort, whatever. Like, I released an episode not too long ago where I lost all the video footage. And I was really bummed because we filmed at a winery. We're in a vineyard. I was really excited. I lost all the footage. Younger me would have been really amped up about it, super upset, like not even want to release it because it's not what I wanted. But I still released it. Like, the content's still good. The message is still great. I lost the footage. Oh well. It's fine. It's okay. There's always more opportunities. It's not a big deal. At the end of the day, in like a few months, I'm not gonna think about it twice. So it's just the whole thing of like, don't be scared of the failure, because that's just part of the process. And even if you fail, you learned something. So take that with you for the next time.
I'd agree. And one thing I would recommend to kind of coincide with that, when I was younger, I was really into like watching martial arts movies. And then I got into martial arts and then started appreciating like the way that it helps you find it kind of focus your body, mind, and spirit. And Bruce Lee, he wrote a book called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and he had a couple of really good quotes. Some of them he stole, but a lot of really good quotes in that book. And be like water was one of the things that I thought for myself was like, yeah, I need to be a little bit more formless in my delivery and how I do things, because if I'm rigid, that's when things break. But you can't catch water. You can contain it for a small amount of time in a glass, but eventually the glass will corrode away, or that water will evaporate and become something else and find its way out. And I think having that type of understanding of myself and the rest of the world, I think that that plays a major role in having the courage or the strength to say, you know what, I don't have to necessarily go with the rest of the group. I can have my own individual thought, and I can move forward from that. And I can accept my defeats, and I can rejoice in my victories. And understand that no, there's no such thing as a little victory or a big victory. They're all just victories. They're all just wins. And then appreciating that. And I think people getting hit in the face, I think that helps. Like, just hit yourself a little bit in the face, get
Get
used
a
to
little slap in.
it. And just, allow yourself to kind of experience that, because that's a sensation, that's a feeling. And if you're so afraid of it because you're so, oh man, I don't know what that's going to be or what that's going to do to me or how I'm going to feel. But if you remove that fear from it, that will remove some of that anxiety from it. And that's why I think the working out is a big deal, because if you're so anxious about how you look, it'll affect the way you present to the world, outwardly. And if you're so anxious and afraid that, some scary man is going to come put hands on you, but even if you can or can't do anything to defend yourself to get away, you have that little bit more confidence. It kind of just sets in and allows you to kind of sit into a point to where you're like, you know what? I am somebody. I deserve to be here. I am here. Let's move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. My wife participated in a program called Impact. She used to work for a fairly private security firm, and they had very high end clientele. She did the Impact class, and it just helped her about awareness and just paying attention to your surroundings. And it had a major effect on her view of the world. It removed a little bit of that fear. And with that little bit of fear being removed, she can operate on a what I'd like to call a more human scale. She didn't have to cross the street because the guy was walking on one side if the person didn't present as outwardly threatening. So things like that I think helps, and the more it's like G.I. Joe used to say that knowing is half the battle. I think the more you know, the more that you can be prepared for it.
I totally agree. And then also, I just love all the quotes you're throwing in there, like Spider Man, G.I. Joe, all the other ones. Um,
Told you I'm a nerd. Like, I'm a total nerd.
oh,
Like, I'd have a
no.
pocket protector if I could. So yeah,
I'm here for it. I'm so here for it. Well, this was a really great episode. Thank you so much for, giving us your perspective, enlightening us on, men's mental health, because that's a huge thing that needs to be talked about more. Not enough men are vulnerable enough or just have the tools to, or the space even just to share. So I really appreciate you. I want to give you the opportunity if you have any plugins. I know you said you mentioned like you got your podcast going and all that. So if you wanted to share a little bit about that, feel free.
definitely. The podcast that I will be releasing in a couple weeks. It's going to be called Civil Discourse. It's going to primarily focus on men's health and men's issues in today's society. Both the ones that are, I think the Matrix is a famous term that they like to use. Both the ones implemented by the Matrix, as well as the ones that we implement on ourselves. It's also going to focus on trying to help people who have differing and opposing opinions see the other person's side, agree to agree or agree to disagree, but still find a way to part as friends. And I think being able to have more of a real connection, even if it is over, a video chat, is something that we lack in today's society. And I think being able to reestablish something like that would be a very good thing, versus creating this other, this person over here is the enemy. To create an enemy is one of my favorite poems. And I think that placing myself in a situation, especially somebody who was like very much a recluse, like everyone that I've told, like, hey, I'm going to be starting a podcast, there's like, you, are you sure? It's like, you're literally the guy who wanted to go move to Montana on a ranch that was off grid. And it's like, oh, I'm still that guy. But I also, I want to make sure that the world that, my wife and I are leaving for our son, because we can't be here forever, I really would like to make sure that that world is, on its way towards becoming better, especially when it comes to like the environment and how we approach it. So the entire point of the podcast is going to be to help people connect, especially men, and then to have men discuss issues openly and in any way that they see fit, so to speak.
Yeah, guys, by the time this episode comes out, the podcast will be ready to go. I'm going to include all the links for you. That way you can go check it out. I really love that concept, civil discourse. Yeah, well, when it comes out, I'm going to be definitely tuning in.
Yeah, I'd even love to have you on as a guest. One thing that I would say, from kind of reviewing some of your previous shows and also talking to you now, uh, you're a person that's an extremely open mind. And I think that that's refreshing. And it's very refreshing because I feel that you would be a person that would be empathetic, to somebody who's just beginning their process and working on themselves versus somebody who's, a couple of years down the line in terms of working on themselves. So I would love to have you on.
Oh my God, I would love to be on. Okay, when we stop recording, then let's schedule it then.
Oh, that sounds good. I mean, because like I've built this freaking like sound room, so I might as well use it.
I was gonna say because when we first chatted, it was a whole different setup, and your setup looks really nice so far. I like the blue light you got going on and all that. So that's so cool.
No, I really appreciate it. I did a combination of like foam and cork, and it's mostly like reused materials because I try to be really big on not, being a major consumer. And then also the light kind of operates in a second means for me. It's an essential oil diffuser. Like, yeah, I'm big on the essential oil thing. I make soap. What can I say? So yeah.
I was gonna ask, I if you sell your soap, I would love to buy some to use it because I love a good soap. So I would love to purchase some.
I'll totally just send you some, like because it's something I love to do, and like everyone tells me, like you really should sell this stuff, but I feel like that'll kind of take away from the artistry, and
Mhm.
I like to use a lot of like exotic oils in the soap that I make, and a lot of exotic animal fats. I do vegan and non-vegan versions because I have friends from every spectrum, but I'm really big on the fact that I have the opportunity to make stuff that I like and I can craft it with care. And then I just like if someone wants it, I give it away because I literally cannot use all the soap myself. I mean, like even if I took bubble baths every day, it wouldn't be a thing. So yeah,
Okay, so then please definitely send me some soap because I would love that.
definitely. When we get off here, what I'll do is, and that goes for like anyone. If you have friends and family that want to try it, because I have probably like 100 different recipes I do.
Okay, okay, give me like a little sampler. We'll do a little sampler.
Definitely, well, 100% will do. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. Okay, guys. Well, we'll wrap it up here before this episode gets too long. But thank you again, Larry. This was a really great conversation. I'm totally looking forward to being on your podcast and chatting more. And yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. All the men out there, I hope you got some really good stuff out of this. Men's mental health needs to be talked about more, and so I hope you guys out there are inspired to find a space to create for yourself if you haven't found one already, to be vulnerable with your fellow dudes, have a deep conversation, and just kind of tune into that. I love you all. If you haven't, like, rate, subscribe. Again, I'm going to include all of Larry's links in the bio. That way you can go check out his podcasts. And we'll see you in the next one. All right, bye, guys.
See you folks later.